is a historic weekend in college football. The first ever 12-team college football playoff continues with a triple header on this Saturday as we welcome you to our CFP Saturday special live right here on College Football Today on SportsGrid. He is the mastermind of the college football pigskin. That is Joe Lisi. He is OK Dubs. That is Kevin Walsh. And I am Ben Stevens. Lisi guy, we have 3 games on this Saturday for the first ever 12-team college football playoff. The largest ever field, the most ever teams in a postseason in the chase for a national championship in the history of this sport. It started on a Friday night in snowy South Bend. As we'll recap between Notre Dame and Indiana in mere moments, it continues with 3 games on this Saturday here on CFT.
Dan, can the underdogs bark? That will be the main question that will get answered today. We saw Indiana potentially step up in terms of the first half and then tail off in the second half of that matchup. Can SMU, can Clemson, Kevin, more importantly, can Tennessee get the victory later tonight? I think they all have a shot. We'll see how it plays out a little bit later.
Yeah, I don't we'll get into the Indiana stuff. What I will say to your question and the general question of can the dogs step up, let's try and remember throughout this college football season how often the home teams were dominant. At minimum, getting the job done. Of course, we're going to be covering the sides, the props, the totals, the whole deal. But whenever you get into the playoffs, it is also just who is going to win. If you're filling out your bracket, right? College basketball, upset Central. You always find them. It's a different ball game, though, right? I'm pretty sure things would look a lot different in a college basketball tournament if we had to go to Cameron Indoor for a couple of rounds, right? The fact of the matter is, Notre Dame this season, I know, again, the one loss they had was at home, but, man, that's a whole different animal. Today, going to Happy Valley or going to play in Columbus, that is the most unique aspect of this entire thing.
It is one of the beautiful things of expansion in this 12-team era. Yes, we need to fix the format. Sure, we can talk about guaranteed opening round buys for conference champions. But one of the beautiful things in the pantheons of this sport, playing significant playoff games for the first time ever on college campuses. Again, to the 7-seed Notre Dame and the 10-seed Indiana in just mere moments. But I do want to set the stage, gentlemen, as we look at the first ever field of 12 in the first ever 12-team college football playoff bracket. Notre Dame, a double-digit win last night. They are on to the Sugar Bowl to take on Georgia. But everywhere else in these opening rounds, Kev, not only do we see home field advantage, but as we did last night, in large part, at least a touchdown spread in favor of every home team. How much is that the nature of the college football playoff as we have seen? How much of that is the fact these games are on campus, having that home factor factored in?
I think that's the big part of it, right? We know home field advantage is still booked into all sports, right? We debate, how much is it worth in the NFL today? How much could it be worth in college basketball, home court advantage might be worth like 14 points with the way that those games always seem to go to the home team. But we know it matters for college football, Lisi. We 100% know it does. So I think when you look at our lines today, take Penn State SMU, for example, I think that means the books would say, at minimum, on a neutral, that's under a touchdown there. And that, I think, gives us the, SMU or even Tennessee, right? Like, look, yes, they're touchdown dogs, but they are not out of their depth heading into that game.
No, I think when you're seeing the spread play out, I think, for Ohio State, unless they're playing a team like Michigan or Ohio State, respectively, Penn State, right? They're not going to be, a 3-4 point dog to SMU or favorite, right? They're going to be an 8.5 point favorite. For Texas, their only losses came to Georgia. So now that Clemson and backdoored getting into the college football playoff with their win over SMU, now you're seeing an 11, 12.5 point number. We know how dominant, just from a straight up perspective, all 3 of those teams are in terms of Penn State, Texas, and Ohio State. They have dominant home field records. and that's why you're seeing these spreads respectively against the underdog. But again, styles make fights. Certain teams like SMU bring a defensive perspective that maybe Penn State hasn't seen before, athleticism, and that's why they play the games.
And I think that is the question that you both have poised and raised. As we talk about brackets in collegiate athletics, we often see madness in opening round upsets. Is that going to be the case here outright on this Saturday triple header in the college football playoff, with our first underdog not even really keeping the game remotely competitive for about 58 of 60 minutes? That was Indiana last night. Again, before we get to South Bend, I do want to show the national championship odds so we can set that stage and the atmosphere for what is on the line and at stake. And I ask you both a very similar question. Lisi Guy, the number 1 seed in Oregon, idle this weekend, will not play into the Rose Bowl in about a week and a half on New Year's Day. They are the national championship favorites at plus 340. Texas, the second best price at plus 370. Ohio State and Georgia tied for that third best number at 5-1. Notre Dame up after the victory last night over IU to plus 550. Lisi Guy, the 11 remaining teams in the hunt for the college football playoff national championship. Before we get going on this Saturday, if you had to lay a wager on any of those national championship prices, who would get your attention?
I would spread it, but I would do Oregon first. And the reason why I say that is we talk about the top 11 teams now. Each one respectively has a weakness that you can maybe exploit, right? We haven't really seen that from Oregon. The biggest game that they had was Ohio State. They answered the bell from a tempo perspective. You could say 4 seconds left. Will Howard made a mistake. I get that. But early on, they're deserving of the 350 price. Georgia, the quarterback concern, Kev, I know we can argue this, but to me, it's still a drop-off from Beck to where we are in terms of the backup perspective. They're going up against a dominant defense in terms of Notre Dame. Notre Dame needs the passing attack. If I had to make one long shot bet outside the top 4, I would take a shot on Tennessee, and the reason why I say that is the front 7, I think, could play with anybody in terms of the top 4 teams that are listed on that board, and the rushing attack, tempo, and their ability to pound the rock in a playoff atmosphere is what would get it done.
Here's the thing, okay? I am really tired of how we're talking about Oregon's defense. That thing is so clearly not championship level, and I don't know what everybody else is watching. Talked about it preseason, talked about it in season. Nobody seems to care. Why? Because of what they did when they went up against non-playoff level teams? Because they nearly put Drew Aller into the draft. They gave Ashton Genty the boost for his Heisman candidacy, and they made Ohio State fans think Will Howard might be the darn guy. You've got to be kidding me. No weakness. Oh, interesting. Dan Lanning, just so everybody knows, real Brandon Staley vibes, who all of a sudden comes in, defensive guru, and you go, hey, why is he so good? Nothing to do with the defensive side of the football. It's actually atrocious. Just like Staley was in L.A., just like Dan Lanning's Oregon groups have been.
So I'm guessing then your wager would not be on the favorite, the Ducks, at a plus 340
absolutely not. I mean, what are we doing? So the team whose defense has yet to have a championship-level effort in any capacity is booked as the favorite with the most difficult pass by a country. No, of course not.
It is a very difficult path. There is no doubt about it. If you had to wager on anybody entering this first triple header of a Saturday in the opening round, who would it be?
The best team in college football, who has consistently had the best wins throughout the season, in the Georgia Bulldogs. That's not a slight to Notre Dame. It is just acknowledging what Georgia has been able to do throughout this season that I still feel many have not actually given them credit for.
Georgia is perfect 4-0 against fellow teams in the college football playoff. 2 victories against Texas. The opening win against Clemson to start this season, and of course, a dominant victory against Tennessee as well. Notre Dame's price, now 5th best to win a college football playoff national title after a 10-point victory last night at home in the first ever on-campus playoff game in the history of the sport. How the Irish got it done to win the in-state showdown against the Hoosiers. We recap everything from South Bend on a Friday night. Up next.
On, Donner and Blitzen. Now, Rudolph, now.
Merry Christmas to all!
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career and might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred or just worked on the side or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this, I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text, put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, hey, I never got the text. And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. When he texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe, like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
It's a new era in CFB to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of the week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoff.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was thinking! But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
We welcome you back to our college football playoff special live right here on this Saturday on College Football Today. Joe Lisi, Kevin Walsh, and Ben Stevens. Our first ever 12-team college football playoff has already begun. It did on a Friday night in snowy South Bend, Indiana, under the watchful eye of Touchdown Jesus, where the 7 seed in Notre Dame hosted the in-state foe in the team on the 10 line. That would be the Indiana Hoosiers. Notre Dame booked as near a touchdown favorite entering our first ever on-campus CFP game, and Notre Dame took advantage of the home crowd in an Indiana team that in yet another step-up spot for just the second time this year did not perform even close to expectation. That final score, Kev, of 27-17 makes it seem as though we got close to a backdoor cover for IU. They were great in the final 2 minutes offensively and aggressively, but not really for 58. It was all Irish last night in South Bend. Notre Dame is on to the Sugar Bowl in a matchup against Georgia.
Yeah, look, I think we can get into the Irish, and we're going to, of course, now be talking about them, but there is now a cloud that hangs over this game because of what Indiana did in their second of just 2 step-up spots this season, and that was, look, nowhere near the level. Indiana did not have to win this game to prove anything. They didn't really even have to cover this game. If that score was actually accurate and not one of the most misleading scores of the season, then it would be fine. And I know we've had blowouts before in the history of the college football playoff.
Right.
But very rarely within that 4-team format were we looking at whether a team was even within any type of reasonable range. Indiana is very unique. They played just 2 games against teams, again, of the level within the playoff, and they were embarrassed in both. Let me tell you, nobody more embarrassing yesterday than Kirk Cignetti. I mean, look, that contract all of a sudden, if I'm Indiana, I'm dead serious. I'd be a little upset about. That guy's running around talking about wins against Coastal Carolina before that game, and then coaches that way? Are you kidding? I'd be mortified if I was an Indiana fan.
Listen, I agree with that, right? If you're going to talk the talk and be the salesman and the brash man that Kurt Cignetti is, incorrectly so for most of his pedigree. You cannot perform the way you did against Notre Dame, and you certainly cannot make those decisions that you did 3 times in Notre Dame territory, including from the Irish's 27-yard line, down by 17 points midway through the third quarter, and punt the football away. And, Joe, that's part of the issue for Cignetti and IU last night. Because in their lone step-up spot in the regular season, the only other game prior to yesterday evening in South Bend booked as an underdog, they did not look the level or the part of Ohio State or truly a top 5 or top 10 team. But Cignetti told us they would learn from that atmosphere. They would learn from their mistakes. In fact, it looked as though they regressed last night against the Fighting Irish.
Yeah, totally outclassed in the trenches. That's what it came down to. They played bully ball against mediocre opponents that they can run the football. They average 174 rushing yards per game during the regular season, plus 14 in turnover margin. They rushed for 53 yards on the ground, 2.3 yards per carry. They were 5 of 12 in terms of third down conversions, and were even in terms of turnover margin. And when you don't stop the run and allow Jeremiah Love to rip off a 98-yard run to set the stage for that matchup, they were uphill from the rest of the way, right? The offensive line couldn't contain the front seven of Notre Dame. Curtis Rourke was short to intermediate on all the throws, under continuous pressure, can never sustain drives until the game was out of reach. Yeah. And ultimately, they gave it their best shot. But in the trenches, that's where Indiana was outclassed by a bigger, more physical team. And Notre Dame is definitely one of the top teams in the nation. If they strike the upset or knock off Georgia, now they're dogs, they can make a run to a national championship. We'll see how it plays out. More consistency out of Riley Leonard and that passing attack. But, hey, that was a great game last night offensively and defensively.
But look, for Notre Dame, right, like they hit the 98-yard home grand slam, if you will, right? IU's defense should not hang their head in shame.
No.
Curtis Rourke, or as I say, Curtis O'Rourke, has shown himself in the 2 step-up games, and the O stands for Ohio. That's the kid that was playing for the Bobcats and nowhere belonged at a Power 5 school. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. I really enjoyed his quarterbacking this year. I thought there was a world where if he showed up in this game, we might go, maybe IU is the best quarterback. No. They had a guy who didn't belong. And I will say this, and people might not like it. What they did in this game probably mattered moving forward. There was a benefit of the doubt that Indiana was given because they were 11-1. Yeah. Let's remember, Indiana wasn't kept out. They were put in this without sweat. They weren't the team watching with bated breath. And I said this on the day it happened, and I still fully believe it. And maybe people think it would have been wrong. I don't know. If they did not have to give us weekly updates, Indiana and SMU both would have missed the playoff for Alabama and Miami. And in this moment, I'm not sure that would have been unfair to Indiana.
You guys know me. I love Hoosiers football. There is a reason you could argue I am sitting on this desk and working for the SportsGrid Network because of Indiana football in a prior historic year. I do not think you can defend Indiana in those step-up spots based on what we have seen in those examples. Can you defend Indiana's resume in what they did based on the constructs of what was presented to them this season? I would say so. Can you defend the committee for their selections in this current format and how it plays out right now? Yes, I think you can. However, I agree with Kevin's point that if you are going to fix this format to try to find a more perfect example of a 12-team era, then teams like Indiana are going to be called into question. A historic season for the Hoosiers nonetheless. Let me just ask you this, most unbiased man in sports media. It's always Notre Dame plus the points. It's only 1.5 points in the Sugar Bowl against Georgia. What is the Irish's outlook the remainder of the way?
Here's the thing. It's tricky, though, because they open Notre Dame as favorites. And it's one of those look-ahead lines where, look, it's fun to hang a look-ahead Notre Dame laying at Georgia, and then all of a sudden you do it, and you go, well, that was silly, huh? And they got nothing but Georgia money, and the Dogs immediately, of course, flipped the favorites.
And as we talked about, Gunnar Stockton, more than likely the starting quarterback for Georgia. Now to Happy Valley next.
On, Donner and Blitzen. Now, Rudolph, now.
Merry Christmas to all!
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred or just worked on the side or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this. I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text. Put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, "Hey, I never got the text." And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. When he texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe, like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
It's a new era in CFB to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of the week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoff.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was thinking! But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
So here we are, making history on a Saturday on college football today. It is our first ever 12-team college football playoff with a Saturday triple header of on-campus playoff games that everybody should enjoy. Our first one up, kicking bright and early at noon Eastern time in a valley that is happy. It is the 6th seed Penn State hosting the final at-large team into this bracket. That would be the 11th seed, SMU. Lisi Guy, both teams finished runner-up in their conference championships this season. Penn State in the Big Ten title game as an underdog. SMU, the slight favorite in the ACC championship against Clemson. Of course, the Tigers, a bid stealer. But here we are, getting ready for this Saturday inside Beaver Stadium. Touchdown, 8.5 in favor of the Nittany Lions. When James Franklin and Penn State are expected to win a football game, they often do. Will they do so today on this Saturday against the Stats?
They might, Ben, but I don't think they're covering their 8.5. I think SMU is live in terms of this matchup. You look at Kevin Jennings, you look at that offense right now, very balanced for SMU, averaging well over 30 points per game, 176 yards per game on the ground with Rashard Smith, their lead running back, and they're averaging around 250 in terms of the passing attack. But we could talk offense all you want. It's the defense that will carry SMU, I believe, in terms of this matchup. You think Penn State, you think defense. They're giving up 103 rushing yards per game, only 178 in terms of the back end. Who has better statistics? SMU. 93 rushing yards allowed per game, 2.7 yards per rush, 32% third down defense. And, oh, by the way, 40 sacks on the year. Over the last 5 weeks, 23 sacks. This defense is getting after it. I know they got abused by Cade Klubnik. This is a different animal, more methodical offense than Penn State have. And we've seen Penn State win but not cover in 3 games this year at home. Ball State, UCLA, and Illinois. I'm taking the points, and they might strike the upset a little bit later today.
So I want to give one update. The number moving a little bit, and not how I would have thought. I would have thought this would have crept closer to 10. There's a 7.5 out there, a flat 8 out there. So it looks like some more Stangs money coming in. I will say you talk about Penn State winning and not covering. And that's where, so I wouldn't go to those games, although totally valid. You look at the two teams quickly, right? So SMU ultimately, it probably appreciates what Indiana did last night. All they got to do is hang with Penn State, and they're the most deserving team of all time, right? BYU all year ranked. I know the circumstances. They lost. Clemson all year ranked. Remember the narrative around Clemson. They were atrocious and can beat no one.
Yeah.
They were rolling SMU.
Yeah.
I get it, got close. So the SMU resume, not awesome. Penn State can't beat any great team. We know that. Again, you want to laugh about a look-ahead line? I dare them to hang one of them against Georgia. Anybody that thinks Penn State's lying to Georgia, you got another thing coming. But look, I don't know if we'll ever even get that game. But Penn State's games against Minnesota and USC are what I would point to of not amazing, but certainly solid teams this year. And both times Penn State was fighting for their very, very last breath. That is why I'm not on the side in this game. I have a different angle. We'll get there with plenty of time this morning.
Yeah.
I would agree with you, and I would lean towards SMU because I've not seen Penn State extend and cover against those solid teams. They've destroyed some bottom feeders, but again, the teams with a pulse, Ben, hang.
Narrative and storyline are going to follow every team, every program, every coach throughout this college football playoff, especially in the expanded field of 12. Because in the 11 years in Happy Valley, this is the first appearance in the CFP for Penn State, taking advantage of that expanded playoff format. As a favorite, the Nittany Lions since the beginning of 2022's college football season, 33 times, 32-1 straight up, 23-9-1 against the spread. Rhett Lashley and his Mustangs only a dog twice this year against TCU, and early on in the ACC slate against Louisville, SMU won outright in both of those. Lisi guy, you think SMU can keep this game within margin on this Saturday in State College? How is the best way SMU does so?
I think from an offensive perspective, they have the more consistent quarterback in Kevin Jennings. We talk about how the defense stepped up over the last 5 weeks, Ben. Kevin Jennings in that offense have averaged over the last 5 games 306 passing yards per game. He's been very clean with the football, only 3 interceptions during that span. I think he does it. He steps up. Here's the other thing. Drew Aller has only 2 300-yard games, one to 0-12 Kent State, the other to USC. They were in both of those games. USC pushed them to the limit.
Drew Aller's completion percentage this season, 69.1%. Last year, sub 60%. Drew Aller is coming back in 2025 to Penn State. We'll talk about that narrative and the players that will affect the outcome next.
On, Donner and Blitzen. Now, Rudolph, now.
Merry Christmas to all!
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred, or just worked on the side, or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this, I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text, put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, hey, I never got the text. And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. When he texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe, like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
It's a new era in CFP to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of the week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoffs.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was Lincoln! But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
On this Saturday, a triple header of college football playoff games for the first ever time in a field of 12. The largest ever group still in the chase for a national championship at this stage in the history of FBS college football. We focus on the opening game of 3 on this Saturday in State College, Pennsylvania. The 6-seed Penn State hosting the 11-seed SMU. An 8.5-point spread in favor of the Nittany Lions. A total that has worked its way down ever so slightly on this Saturday morning to 52 and a hook. Kev, right before the break, we were comparing the quarterbacks. Kevin Jennings for SMU, who has been great since taking over following that BYU loss earlier in the year full time. Drew Aller has been the guy in State College for 2 years, make it 3 as he will return in 2025. He has been fine in spots. He was okay against Oregon. How good will he have to be today against the Stings defense that does allow some yardage through the air?
Forgive me for laughing, but in all seriousness, just to my Oregon point earlier, he played in that game, had people on the timeline being like, this kid's got all the chops, top 5 pick. That's just so everyone understands the level of the Oregon defense this year. With that being said, I really like the over in this game at 52.5. I think both of these teams' best path to success is throwing the football in this game. The more pass attempts we get, more explosive plays, less of the clock running. I worry a little about the SMU run defense holding up just because Penn State could be a different caliber. You think back to last night. So the 3 best rush defenses on a yards per carry statistics, Ole Miss, Indiana, SMU. Obviously, you give up a 98-yarder, so maybe IU was benefited again from the schedule. SMU could be the same, but I think it means Aller has to throw, and I know Jennings has to throw. And I mentioned the USC and the Minnesota games. USC's offense moved it no problem. Minnesota's offense moved it no problem. I mean, the Ducks are still scoring in that Big Ten title game, quite frankly. And, again, look at SMU. SMU, 30-plus every single game. They're going out there and playing. And what I do really like, and what I saw in the Clemson game, is I'm not going to get quit, right? Is they're not going to do what Cignetti did yesterday, which was fold up and ask to be anywhere else in the world than on the sideline coaching against Notre Dame. SMU's not going to do that. They're not gutless like that Indiana team is. So I'm going to keep saying that too because he deserves every word of it. He really does. What an embarrassment. And I like guys who talk their stuff, but just don't show up and
Back
do that.
it up.
Go for every 4th down. Like if Dan Campbell would have then stepped in and called the plays for Cignetti, you can tell I'm still hot about it. Indiana would have been in a much better place. I really love the over in this game, Lisi, Penn State, SMU.
You might get it. I mean, we talk about styles. So SMU pushes tempo, and that's something that, Penn State struggled with against Oregon. That tempo type of offense. Now, I will say, if we're looking quarterbacks and you talk about the success of Drew Aller, yes, he throws for 226 in the Big Ten championship, but Penn State also rushed for 292 on the ground, right? So things were wide open when you're running the football with Singleton and Katron Allen. If they have that type of success today, they're going to steamroll SMU, cover this number fairly easy. That's easier said than done. But for Aller, we haven't really seen him break out, like I said, outside those 2 performances against Kent State and USC. In the USC game, they trailed in the first half of that matchup like 20-7 or 20-3. They were in come-from-behind mode each and every step of the way. So, again, you might get the over. I just believe that the more balanced offense is SMU, and we saw Cade Klubnik attack that secondary over the top. I think that is the recipe to potentially beat SMU, but I'm not sold on Drew Aller and Penn State's consistency offensively to do that.
The Nittany Lions are a top 20 defense across the board. Kevin Jennings for SMU, at least 225 passing yards in all 9 ACC contests this year. You saw his prop. It is right at that number. He is averaging basically 286 throughout conference action this season. Penn State has only allowed 2 quarterbacks over 225 and a hook. Connor Bazelak of Bowling Green and Dylan Gabriel in the Big Ten championship game. Kev, quickly to the total, 52.5. If we do go over that, highlight a player for us on either side, if you will, that you think allows the offense to be on the upswing.
I think Kevin Jennings is a really nice play on the 225-plus passing prop. He's hit that in 9 consecutive games, and I think against Clemson, right? He didn't have his best game, but he threw it 50 times. They clearly trust the kid there. So I think, Ben, you're going to be in a good spot on that number, regardless of game script.
Lisi guy, SMU, you think stays in this football game, which is a player for the Mustangs and Rhett Lashley, you expect to get it done?
It's their lead running back, Brashard Smith. I took him plus 110 yards on the ground at plus money. I think the perception is dominant front seven by Penn State, only giving up $103 on the ground. That SMU is more of a finesse team. They're not going to be able to run it. The passing attack might open up that later in the matchup. He could blow right through that number, Ben.
A top 10 rushing defense for Penn State, a top 10 scoring defense. SMU, the best scoring defense in the ACC, fourth best defending the run. But it's not just one college football playoff game on this Saturday. It's three. So let's get to our second, 4 p.m. Eastern Time in Austin, Texas. The top at-large team in this bracket, number 5 Texas, playing host to the bid stealer in the ACC champs in number 12 Clemson. Lisi guy, when you look at this spread, now nearing 2 touchdowns in favor of the Longhorns, it opened in double digits. For most of this week, it was 11.5 in favor of Texas. It's now near 2 touchdowns. Clemson, though, despite stealing a bid, perhaps, as that conference title winner, the most experience of any program that enters this 12-team field, the 7th CFP appearance for Dabo Swinney and the Tigers. Will the game today in Austin be closer than the spread indicates?
I don't think so. It might be close for a half. I think if you're going to take Clemson, or if it was me, I would take a first-half perspective, looking for them to slow down the tempo. But I think Texas has way too much athleticism offensively and defensively. I think the speed of the wide receivers challenge Clemson over the top. I think the rushing attack of Texas can be dominant. We're talking about Clemson's front seven, Ben, that's given up 150 rushing yards per game. That's one of the worst statistical defenses in Clemson history over the past 10 seasons, right? You look at the games that they had lost. South Carolina, they allowed Lenore Sellers and that offense 267 on the ground. Louisville, 311 rushing yards on the ground, 7.3 yards per carry. I think this is Texas early and often. I lean to Texas in terms of the points, Kev, but I love the over. I think it's points aplenty. We get into the 60s today.
So the number's sitting now at 13.5. I imagine any Clemson backer who's not in yet will sit, and see if the 14 could appear. Unless you're going to do what I'm doing, and that's just grab 7.5 in the first half. Look, backdoors can certainly be open. Shout out to the Gamecocks. But for me, I think if Clemson's going to be here, they're going to be here early in this game. Yeah. I think Texas's best attack in this matchup is to run the football. Doesn't mean they can't run it explosively, Lisi, but that keeps things maybe moving at a slower pace. And I look at Clemson throughout this season. Look, that's where the Dabo experience you mentioned. For sure. The game against Georgia. 6-0 at half, right? And then they got absolutely dumped on their heads as things went on. Tied at half in the game against South Carolina, up 24-7 at half against SMU. In 2 of their 3 true road games in ACC play, they were up by margin in the first half. So I think Clemson has to come out and keep this in range. And I think there's a chance that if we are playing with a lot of rush attacks from Texas, I might only need a touchdown out of Clemson just to stay within striking distance of the 7.5.
Dabo Swinney took over as the interim head man in Clemson, South Carolina in 2008. Full-time permanent head coach starting in 2009. The Tigers in the last 15 years, only an underdog 33 total times, 20-13 against the spread, 14 outright victories, including the bookends of this season so far. Season opener against UGA, did not come close even to a cover, an outright victory in the ACC championship against SMU. In fact, it was the only cover this year for Clemson against a team that is above 500. Texas has had its own woes, beating the best on its slate as well. We'll continue the breakdown from Austin, up next on College Football Today.
On Donner and Blitzen. Now, Rudolph, now!
Merry Christmas to all!
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred or just worked on the side or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this. I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text. Put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, "Hey, I never got the text." And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. He texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe. Like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
It's a new era in CFP to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of a week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoffs.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was Lincoln! But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
A college football playoff tripleheader on a historic day in CFP, the first ever 12-team CFP in the history of this sport. Our second game of 3 on this Saturday afternoon in Austin, Texas. The 5th-seeded Longhorns hosting number 12 Clemson, the last team into this field because of that outright victory in the ACC title game. We'll talk about Clemson and their outlook in just a moment, given their college football playoff pedigree. But, Kev, I think it was rather clear to see on display in the SEC championship game that Texas offensively, the final month of this season, has not looked fully fit. Perhaps it is the health of Quinn Ewers. Perhaps it is not the right quarterback under center for UT. What do you think Steve Sarkisian's plan is now in the college football playoff with additional time to prep at the quarterback spot between Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning?
I am sure his plan is the same it has been under less ideal circumstances, and that's to live or die by Quinn Ewers. And look, there are instances when you say, look, we're gonna go with the guy who got us there, and you can't blame him, right? I'll make the comparison. You mentioned the Georgia Bulldogs. All of those Beck struggles were tough. And you think, man, could Georgia move on to somebody else? But behind Carson Beck is Gunnar Stockton, who's nobody has ever heard of, and Jaden Rashada, who's seemingly not beat Gunnar Stockton out on the depth chart.
Yeah.
Behind Quinn Ewers is maybe the most heralded quarterback prospect in the history of football.
For sure.
Who has played for Quinn Ewers this season and looked like he's had the goods. That is, again, why it is such a talking point. You sometimes have to just make the difficult call, and instead, Sark is making a conservative pregame decision to go with Quinn Ewers when, look, I understand. Like, we now probably think Texas is going to be in the playoff every year for the end of time. You don't know that.
Right.
There's nothing. Alabama didn't think they weren't going to be in the playoff until they beat Georgia, and they're getting ready to play Michigan.
Well, I think he takes a different approach today. I think he starts off with Quinn. If Quinn is turnover prone, I think we'll see what played out in the first meeting against Georgia, going to Arch Manning for a spark. Because if they're struggling as a 13.5-point home favorite, and all odds and eyes are on this team to make it to a national championship game, and they're built that way offensively and defensively, if you're not getting the consistent quarterback play, he'll make the switch, especially after playing in the semifinal playoff game last year against Michael Penix in Washington. The expectation and bar is set, so we'll see how that plays out. I will say this, when you look at the quarterback situation and you look at Quinn Ewers in the SEC championship, threw for 358. Just, 2 interceptions. They couldn't get, red zone opportunities. They took sacks, bad decision-making by the quarterback, put them in a position to kick field goals and not touchdowns. That cannot be today. If you're looking at the stats, though, Ben, they are a much more dominant home team, and I understand opposition plays into that. But you look at the stats. Texas at home this year, averaging 305 passing yards per game. On the road, 269, a little bit of a drop-off. In terms of the rushing attack, they average 180 at home. In terms of on the road, they're averaging $139. Significant drop-off. So they expect to start fast, and this is why Steve Sarkisian was brought into Austin to out-game plan Dabo Swinney and that defense today.
Listen, Texas has 0 wins over teams that are currently ranked. The Longhorns only have 3 wins against power conference teams above 500. Clemson in 5 games against power conference foes above 500. 1-4 straight up. 1-4 against the spread, or 2-3 straight up, rather. 1-4 against the spread. 4 of those 5 games under. We showed you the numbers on Quinn Ewers. Arch Manning has not attempted a pass, despite playing in multiple games since the blowout victory over Florida back in early November. Lisa, you think we are going to see points? We'll get to the game in Columbus in just a moment. Whether it's Cade Klubnik or somebody else on that Clemson offense who has to contribute to the scoring output for a Clemson team that against the best of the best has struggled offensively.
Can't just be Cade Klubnik. It has to be Phil Maffa. And the reason why I say that is, again, you look at that matchup against SMU. Klubnik throws for 262. 4 touchdowns, but they couldn't run it consistently in terms of the second half. They were held to 62 yards on the ground, right? We know that Texas has one of the best secondaries in all of college football, holding opposing offenses to 143 passing yards per game. If they can limit Carson Beck in back-to-back games, right, for basically 5 quarters, they can do so potentially with Cade Klubnik. Has to be Phil Maffa. He's plus 130 to score a touchdown, but you need productivity out of the rushing attack tonight.
66 yards on the ground for the veteran Maffa or fewer in the last 3 games for Clemson against FBS foes. Texas is the best passing defense in the sport, still top 15 defending the run. Team total for the Clemson Tigers, 19.5. That number might be very key if Clemson is going to keep this game within striking distance. It is our second of 3 on this college football playoff 12-team Saturday. Let's get to our nightcap in Columbus. The 8-9 matchup between the teams that are ranked 6 and 7 in that final CFP top 25. Kev, the Ohio State Buckeyes, more than a touchdown favorite at home against Tennessee. Total stands at 46.5 for what should be a very bitterly cold night at the Horseshoe that is Ohio Stadium. More than a touchdown here. How competitive will this matchup be between the Big Ten's Ohio State and the SEC's Tennessee?
I think it'll be competitive. I'll just say, because we got plenty of time, but just they all come around. They all come around. 2 years. I don't know, man. You think he's getting it done at Ohio State? Hold on, Kev. He's 42 and blah-de-de-blah. All right, next year.
Yeah, but who was blah-de-de-blah?
Right, well, right, exactly. So next year, hey, you think he's getting it done at Ohio State? Maybe I said they should hire Tom Herman. I'll stick to it. That's fine. But Kevy's 51 and blah-de-de-blah. All right. And now, all of a sudden, his job's on the line.
Yeah.
He's coaching for his job. Because I'll tell you this right now. They lose, and they bring him back? No.
Not happening. Not happening.
Win total be 4.5. Portal. I don't know, baby.
He won't make it out of the tunnel if they lose tonight.
Oh, I don't think so. He might plant a flag and try to get arrested himself. Ross B. York, the AD in Columbus, has given Ryan Day his confidence. But how tight might those you-know-whats be if this game is close tonight? We'll break it down next.
On, Donner, and Blitzen. Now, Rudolph, now!
Merry Christmas to all!
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred, or just worked on the side, or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this. I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text. Put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, "Hey, I never got the text." And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. When he texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe, like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
It's a new era in CFP to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of the week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoffs.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was thinking! But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
We welcome you back, rounding out this opening hour of college football today, live on our triple header day of college football playoff action. We have gone through all three of the matchups. We continue with the nightcap tonight in Columbus, the 8-seed Ohio State, the 9-seed Tennessee. A 7.5-point spread in favor of the Buckeyes. The over-under, the lowest for any of our CFP opening round games at 46.5. Lisi Guy, as we look at this matchup, and we talked about the pressure that is mounting on those in Columbus, Ryan Day, the head coach, in a big spot, trying to rectify the very sour taste in the mouth of those in C-Bus after losing to the Maize and Blue of Michigan for a fourth consecutive year. If he wants to calm the waters, per se, in Columbus, how big does Ohio State need to win by tonight?
7.5. I say that very convincingly. You got to win by 7.5, 8 or more. All right, that's it. Because I think anything else will be unacceptable. And the reason, I say that is we talk about playing at home and how important it is to have that home game for some of these teams. I wouldn't argue that point for James Franklin and Ryan Day, respectively. I think both of those coaches would like to be on the road as opposed to playing in their respective.
They might have a longer shelf life of getting out the stadium.
Right? I mean, seriously. This is an important game, and the reason why I say that is you look at the game against Oregon, right? Oregon abused that secondary for Ohio State vertically, and they attacked them on the perimeter with the rushing attack of Jordan James and Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah.
The only team similar from a tempo perspective is Tennessee. I honestly believe that. They run it at such a high pace that they could potentially wear down that front seven of Ohio State. And Nico might only have to throw 15, 16 times in this matchup if the rushing attack is ripping off 4.5, 5 yards per carry. That is the style and the matchup tonight. I really want to see how this game does play out. A lot of pressure on Will Howard, a lot of pressure on that defense. They haven't answered the bell. Certainly against a blue-collar rushing attack in Michigan last time they played. I'm leaning to Tennessee. I like them with the points, and I do feel they strike the upset.
So my favorite bet in this game is a player prop, but I know not everybody out there can get those, and I've certainly been having fun betting all the sides in bowl season, so I wanted to...
On a heater, by the way.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's all right. Nice
Why
to
not?
see.
Oh, spread the love.
Don't think you were on Jacksonville State yesterday like the rest of us, but...
That was Christmas shop.
on one corner of the phone. So, if I may, spread math a little.
Please.
Now, by the way, you don't get to do that as much in bowl season, so I want to take this while I can. Tennessee is catching the same number that they caught when they went to Georgia, the week after Georgia had lost that game to Ole Miss. And I'm just trying to perception of Georgia going into that game versus Ohio State going into this game, perception of Tennessee going into that game versus Tennessee now. And that's what I found myself more gravitated towards of the perception around Tennessee. We are rightfully focused on Ohio State because of everything.
Right.
But I look at Tennessee's last game of the year. We were still here, and it was 17-7, 14-0 Vanderbilt. And I was as confident as I'm like, they are done. They are absolutely done. Pavia does it again. He's going to get his 16th season next year. Real excited for that. They're going to run. I know it's Vanderbilt. To go down 14-0 and have the lead at half was very impressive to me from Tennessee. Not the type of game I thought they would have been able to execute here. You mentioned the spread. There's only 7.5 still out there. We're moving. Maybe we'll come back around. I would agree with Joe. Getting a touchdown plus in this game here, again, Ohio State's separation, they've won big games, they've hung in big games, but they've not massively extended on anybody, ironically, outside of Indiana.
Favored in all 12 games this year, that being Ohio State, just 6-6 against the number. Tennessee an underdog twice, outright win against Alabama, a non-cover against Georgia. Both of those games featured at most 48 points. Tennessee in 4 non-conference games averaged more than 61 points per game with an average margin of difference in those two of better than 58 points per game. But in their 8 SEC matchups this season, averaging just 25 points per game offensively with an average margin of fewer than 6 points per game. And when you talk about defense, there is none better statistically than that of Ohio State. The best scoring defense in the country, 10.9 points per game, the best total defense in the country. A top 10 rushing defense, by the way, Kev, but some of those numbers slightly off.
The sample size for both teams are very weird. I do say, and we'll have more time, Jeremiah Smith. The kid's going to have a day.
I think he is because he did not against Michigan for some weird reason. Hour number 2 on college football today is up next.
On, Donner and Blitzen. Now, Rudolph, now.
Merry Christmas to all!
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred or just worked on the side or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this, I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text. Put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, hey, I never got the text. And I'm like,
no.
Oh, yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. When he texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe, like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
It's a new era in CFP to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of a week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoff.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was thinking, but he had that program was already going there.
Only on SportsGrid.